Annie is probably one of the most misunderstood characters in all of Attack on Titan. While the fanbase mostly tends to focus on scenes like this, few try to actually understand her character. I'll be showing a mix of manga panels, as well as shots from the anime. For those unfamiliar with manga, the text bubbles and panels are read in order from right to left. Annie's struggles are shown in the form of two main concepts: a lack of care for human life, as well as an inability to act selflessly. Here's a character-defining scene from the day Annie, Bertolt, and Reiner infiltrated Paradis Island. It was after they lost Marco to a wandering Ymir Titan. Annie wants Reiner to take the blame for their failure, as he was the one Marco died saving. Honorary Marleyan, chosen warrior, who gives a damn? Marley, Eldia, they could all go to hell. They're all liars, every one of them. They only ever think about themselves. And I'm the same. I need to get back alive. Annie doesn't trust either side of this conflict. They're all liars, as she puts it. And she's the same. Here we see the mindset behind one of her main struggles I mentioned earlier. The idea of doing things purely for others and not just for yourself. Let's talk about her disregard for human life. Some people of the fanbase claim that Annie is a sociopath. They often point towards this scene of her toying with one of the scouts that tried to attack her. So, is Annie just a sociopath? Well, while we do have moments like this, we also have moments like these. When Marco overheard Reiner and Bertolt talking about destroying the wall, Annie is the one that Reiner pressured to remove his ODM gear. During this scene, Reiner is in his warrior personality. He questions why Annie would save Connie earlier during the battle for Trost. Annie begins to remove Marco's gear and looks extremely distressed while doing so. During Annie's OVA episode, she has a nightmare about that very incident and wakes up sweating, showing she has a form of PTSD over what happened. After the Trost battle, there's a scene of Annie apologizing to one of the corpses. So there's actually quite a few examples of Annie showing remorse for death. So why did she toy with that scout? Well, let's look at another scene during the Marley flashback arc. All the young warrior cadets are talking amongst themselves. Bertolt turns to ask Annie what she thinks about their conversation, but rather than being engaged with the other children, we instead see her interest is directed towards squishing a bug with her foot. In a later episode, we get a flashback of this moment from her perspective. It all stopped mattering to me. Who people were, where they came from, whether they lived or died. I didn't think any life had value, not even my own. But as she spent time on the island, as she spent time with people, that had to have changed. Otherwise, these scenes wouldn't make any sense. So why, after spending years on the island, did she spin that scout around? Again, this is one of Annie's internal struggles. Annie can't go home until she completes her mission. To complete her mission, she has to kill a lot of people. She has to kill people with her own hands. Imagine what that does to a person. Here's some interesting dialogue from Aaron to Zeke. The memory of when he slaughtered the royal family of the walls. He took their young children and smashed and smeared them like bugs. I didn't just see it. I remember how they felt. You literally feel the people you're crushing like bugs. So it's no wonder Annie was stomping on insects as a child. You have to make yourself numb to human life to continue doing what you're doing. It's not like you're killing humans from range with rocks like the Beast, or with weapons like the Warhammer. She's literally crushing them with what feels like her own hands. Annie is trying to disconnect herself from the act she's actually committing by trivializing it. She's not killing a real person, it's just some bug she doesn't care about. It's whatever. At least that's what she needs to believe to continue doing what she's doing. Let's cover her second struggle, the idea of acting selflessly, or as she puts it, being a good person. She actually uses this phrase quite a bit throughout the story. Annie is extremely foreign to the concept of being a good person and doing things purely for someone else. She says as much in the example I gave in the first image. They only care about themselves, and I'm the same way. But she found an interest in Armin. She considers Armin to be a good person. Armin is someone who would help others whether or not it benefited him. When Annie spared Armin's life, that act was something so incredibly foreign to her. Armin also questions why she did it, and she doesn't even know the answer. Keeping Armin alive in that moment doesn't help her complete her mission and go home. In fact, it's the reason her identity ended up being revealed. Annie's ideology is being challenged throughout her time on the island. When she was younger, she was cold to all human life. She didn't care about anyone else. But here and there, we see her struggling to retain this mindset. Before we head towards the conclusion of her arc, we need to bring up another important scene. After the rumbling begins, and Annie is released from the crystal, she says something to Hitch after telling her a bit about her life. I have a father waiting for me, and others have people just as important to them too. I didn't used to care about anything, but it's different now. I think I've committed irredeemable sins, but if it meant I could return to my father, I'd do it all over again. Annie knows that what she did was wrong. Yes, her circumstances in life were absolutely terrible, but it doesn't change the fact that she did bad things. Although we know she changed a bit during her time on the island, her worldview seems to have remained the exact same. She shockingly claims she'd do it all over again, just to selfishly get back to her father. This is the very thing she was drunk on throughout her time on the island. It's just like Kenny Ackerman says. They couldn't keep going unless they were drunk on something. And we see just that. Once she's been told it's too late to save Liberio from the rumbling, she decides to give up. She doesn't have anything to fight for anymore. She has nothing to gain from risking her life at this point. Interestingly, she has a conversation with Kiyomi, who is quite similar to Annie in this way. Kiyomi only wanted to use Paradis' resources for her own gain. Now that her homeland is going to be destroyed, she realizes what a fool she's been. I wonder, why don't we realize we've lost it until it's gone? The feeling of respect for the dignity of others, without regard for profit or loss. Annie thinks back to all the connections she's made. She has people she cares about. She also remembers Armin, the good person who would sacrifice for others without any personal gain. And in the end, she finally makes the change. From how it all started, she now makes the decision to help stop the rumbling. Her choice to go back is the perfect ending to both of her inner conflicts. As far as she knows, her father is dead. She doesn't have a home to save anymore. But despite this, she makes the entirely selfless choice to stop the rumbling and save millions of human lives.